Hi there. Welcome to New Tracks Modeling. New Tracks is an exciting new digital opportunity to obtain mentoring to help you improve your modeling. You will meet talented modelers and manufacturers from all over the world who share their model building skills and artistic advice. Improve your modeling and increase the confidence in your modeling efforts. Share your building efforts with fellow modelers and have some fun doing it. The shows are live on Zoom and YouTube, so be sure to join in and ask your questions. Now here is New Tracks founder and your host, Jim Kello, NMRA.
Well, welcome. Good evening. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. We hope you'll come back often and hope you'll tell your friends about it so they can join us too. I've got some very quick announcements and then we'll get into our show. First, I hope you'll support our scholarship program. It's $1,000. You have to be a high school graduate or becoming a high school graduate. You have to be a modeler. You have to be a model railroader. And you have to be going for either a degree or education in a science, technology, engineering, art, or math course in a higher education, a college, junior college, or accredited technical institute. If you're interested, we hope that you'll apply. We hope that we get a lot of applications. We've already gotten one, and we've had so far 89 people come to our site and investigate our scholarship. So I'm encouraged by that. But I do want as many applications as we possibly can get, and we encourage you to take a look at what's involved in applying. You can do it over the internet. It's no big deal, and we'd love to hear from you. Second announcement is the next My Bill is February the 15th. We're going to change it around a little bit. We hope that you'll submit maybe a couple of photos of a model you're working on or have built or are thinking about building. And we're going to try to get more people involved in it that have never been to the My Bills before or never participated. We want maybe 2-3 minutes a person and as many people as we can possibly get to show their models and what they're working on. If you have a longer presentation that you'd like to make on a model you're working on, that's fine. Just let me know and I can get that scheduled. But we'd like to try to get the My Bills into short presentations of models you're working on or building now or have built in the past so that we can all see what you're doing and hopefully try to tailor our show to what we think that you're interested in and the kinds of models that you're building. Third thing I want to talk about is show you a brief video of our next modeling lifestyle that's going to be coming up very shortly. But I want to introduce you to the modeler that we're going to feature.
Join the modeling lifestyle at 7 p.m. Eastern Time on February 2nd, where we will feature the modeling lifestyle of Mike Tylick. Mike is a well-known and prolific modeler and author.
I love the sound of a whistle.
Somebody that I really have a lot of respect for originally told me about Mike. And once I've seen some of his modeling and met with him and so forth, you're really going to enjoy talking with him and meeting him. He's just one fantastic modeler. Now I'd like to turn to Father Ron Walters for our prayer for the evening. Father Walters, thank you.
Oh God, as we express our creativity in creating in miniature the world around us, may we marvel at the beauty and genius which created the world and instilled in us a portion of your great knowledge and wisdom. Give success to the work of our hands, O God. Amen.
Father Walters, thank you so very much. I so appreciate your participation in our shows and all you do for us.
Thank you.
Now I want to turn to Philip Cruz, who is the owner of Miniatures by Philip. When I introduced Philip last week, his segment got more views than any other segment that we ran last week. So Philip, welcome back. I understand you're going to build a barn for us.
I am. The first I redid the concrete. It was so hard last week. I wanted to kind of show, and it's about to harden on me this time, but it kind of just show how easy it is. It should be easier than this, but to draw in your lines and to blow them out. And a quick thing here, a lot of times people need arches. Just shave down a pipe, a PVC pipe, and cut it like that. And just have your wood, I had it here, wood that goes in here like that. And it's so easy to do your arched bridges. I'm going to set this aside. And here's the barn I want to work on tonight. As I said, it's best to go ahead and build the left and right sides because to do the front, we're going to need to set our rafters. And it's much easier to set the rafter, the bird's mouth, over it is than to put this and to try to work each piece of these around that. So first, I'm just going to build a quick frame. Normally, I would put some wood glue, let me see, in along with this. I'm going to get me a glue stick right off the bat. I put me a couple of strips in here to help have more glue area, as well as also to nail Brad into if I want to. And so I don't know where that sticker came from, but and I always do these just strictly out of just scrap wood. There goes my air compressor, but it won't stay on in a moment. Get these in. I'm going to show you the easy way to do rafters. Get your cut your bird's mouth, get your angles and all of that. See where my other piece is. Seem not a cut to not cut for. Anyway, this will hold together while I do what I want to do. So what I need to do to determine the rafter length is to find the overall, which is 8 5/8 on this one, and find my ink pen. So I'm going to need to be 4 5/16 will be the center. Well, the thing wants to glue together. And what I do is I've cut some little strips that I will use as rafters. And I just simply turn the building on its edge. Get that notch off. And I will get about the angle that I want for the roof and simply draw the bird's mouth. And I take another stick and try to just line it up straight, same distance from here to here, here to here. And I just draw my angle. And then I go to the saw, as I've already cut the one out, and I will mark this as my pattern. And then I just sit down and draw my other ones out. I'm going to need to cut 4 here real quick. I should have already done this. Always be sure they're lined at the top in case one is thicker than the other. That will, they'll still be the same height on your barn. Let me get one more here. Sorry about this. I should have had 4 cut because no, this is going to take a little time. Just marking them. Well, tell you what, I'm going to try to do it with just 2 to show you what we need to do. So, Tom, if you'll swing around behind me, I'm going to cut. Sorry, I'm moving so fast. too drawn out. So I would just normally just put these on, glue them at first. If they're gonna glue, would put my brad gun back hooked up. And again, I usually use some wood glue too. Normally, I'm not going to glue these tops because I need to put a thin piece of wood that will go from this one to the back one for all the other rafters to sit to come against. So right now I'm going to do like this, and then I'll show you how to maybe make your loft. Just simply come in, and what I'm going to do is just reach here on this one. Well, don't do that. I had that one marked for rafters. Let me try again here. Yeah. Then I'm going to just turn right around, put equal these out. And put this in. Stick that in good. Then I'll just measure. Sometimes I'm lucky on this and I don't keep wanting to use my rafters. All right. A little bit short. What I normally do, I won't do right now. I run a brace across the back of this that glues to both of the vertical pieces, and it just helps to tie everything together. I would put it like here. You can come on out and draw your angles and just glue that. That gives everything just more support. For instance, on this one, I would probably go ahead and raise this up just a little so it don't sit right over the door. And just put a little glue. And you can shoot brads in here, or if you use wood glue along with this, it's gonna be stout enough. Now, no, I didn't do this one quite. I'm gonna cut this this down a little bit. Try to just try and have some of this ready. And what I do, I'm going to quickly show you how to do this instead of having to use all these alternating planks. So what I would do, I will actually set this like this, and once I put my vertical things in, I'm going to cut this out. And so the way I do this, I would take a piece of wood that I have sliced down. All right, Tom, I need to move over to this one again. And then I would just simply raise this up a little bit. Simply cut that. Then I will put my top piece off. And hit the side. And then what I'll do is go down like that. Now I'll do this all the way across. I just gonna go two right now. Then I would come back, cut in like forward there. That gets it. It looks like each individual planks. Then when I'm through again, I glue this back on.
I can't, Philip, you're breaking up. I can't hear you.
Oh, okay. Okay. Is your
That's
sound
better.
up?
Yep, that's better.
That's where we're moving around.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I should be able to stay. Well, I'm gonna have to move some, but anyway, the rest of it, you just start. Normally, I'll put the first piece or two where it connects all three. Tie everything together good. I would cut this. Once I get right over into here, I may want a door here. I will start splitting them because the barn's gonna be tall and generally it would take 2 boards. So I'd run this all the way over to the once I put my little pieces in here for the door where they rest against, and then I'll cut that out right against these vertical pieces. I like to get a few pieces on before I do that so it holds everything in place. So this is what I would do next. And like I say, several pieces are marked on the backside. And you can do this with popsicle sticks or whatever, just cut that off. I mean, you can paint them gray. I had a barn over here today, right here, that I kind of grayed up by using a mixture of black and brown. I guess it'd be for one of the smaller trains, repair shop. Then I've got some of the other little small buildings over there. Another thing I want to show you, easy thing to do is a red barn, for instance. All I did to do this, of course, I just drew it out, a piece of plywood. I went to my table saw, as I showed you last week, set it on a 45 where it just barely comes up. And it'd be better if you didn't have these, because I realized once I did that, I couldn't follow. I had to just hand do it. But you cut it so thin and use the very corner of the 45 to cut your old thing, end grooves. And it looks like you've got the boards on there. And then you can either pour the concrete like I did, or you can take some of the cement caulk and just put on here, because a lot of these barns had stone foundation, and you just take some little small pebbles you get out of your yard or wherever, and just stick those right in, and by a few hours now they'll be there. Sometimes I'll stick some up like this if they're thin, try to get two on there, and just go ahead like that. And then of course all you've got to do is to just piece your barn together at that point. If you glue it, or I would definitely use wood glue along with hot glue, but if you've got a brad nailer, that's great, pin nailer, whatever, and just put your sides on, and from there it's just measuring and fitting your top. And that's a quick barn there. You can make that in an hour or two. And this one doesn't take long once you get started on it. And once you get enough pieces right here to kind of hold everything on both sides in place, I was cut this out and then fit my door in. And then I would have the rafters, about every inch or so apart. Then of course, we come back with the slats, little thin pieces of wood. It's almost necessary to have a table saw to cut all this with. A person can do it if he's got a big enough blade on a bandsaw, or he can back saw it. But that's basically what I was going to show tonight. I don't even know how much time is left. But one thing I saw today that I've run across that I have, if you ever need any, this would be for bigger buildings, but if you ever need any fluted columns, and they have some this short, Hobby Lobby, but it's going to be in the cake decorating section of all places. You can get about, I think, 4 to a pack for it's like $5.99 the last time I bought them, and you can't beat that anywhere. I started a show last week about how to make your own little shrubbery. Just take a foam, and no, I do it on the bandsaw. It wants to jerk it out of your hand. You really have to concentrate on what you're doing. But you can, I have used a Dremel. I forget which type blade I used, but you just kind of cut it to the shape. If this scissors will cut, you need a good pair of scissors, but cut it to shape and have no square corners, just completely almost rounded. And then you just, with a good pair of scissors or something, you just tear it pretty well, just tear it at different places. And this pair is good for that if it wouldn't lap over itself. But you can do that, or you can make shrubbery, hedges and things like that, kind of cut into it and just painted a couple of variations of green. Because this stuff is, you buy it already made, it's high. They're very expensive, and you don't get much in a pack. And it's like $12.99, and you can get a sponge and make a world of shrubbery with it. You have any questions?
Well, Philip, I tell you, we're out of time because you've got to get to church. I promised I'd get you out of here by 7:20. So we will see you next week. I can't thank you enough for what you're doing for us. And you have a good evening, sir.
You too.
Well, now I'd like to turn to Gary Shurgold, NMR, for his bits and pieces. Tonight, he's doing one with Phil Edholm, and this is the last one that Gary has for us. Hank Primas doesn't have any more quick tips right now, and nobody has responded to him to help him get some new ones. And Gary's in the same boat. After tonight, he's out of bits and pieces. So I know that all of you out there have ideas and tricks and tips that you use all the time. And if you'd like for them to be on the show, contact either Hank or Gary, and they'll make sure that it's on the show. But without your help now, they've pretty well gone through what they have at this point, and this will be the last one that Gary has until we can get some more help giving him ideas. So Gary, welcome.
Thanks very much, Jim. Okay, share screen. And here we go. Come on. There we are. Okay, everyone can see that?
Sure.
Okay, what we're gonna, bits and pieces tonight. What we're gonna talk about tonight is one of the methods I use. Now, I started this method of controlling my switches manually. And it's a fairly simple way I do it. And this was back in the 80s when I started to build this layout. As you can see up here, all these little levers, all these levers control my switches. Now this is in the main yard. And the thing I use is I have what they call, it's a wire flexible cable, but you can also use 1/8 inch plastic rod. And I feed inside the plastic rod, I use a fishing line. And what I do is to make up the parts that are needed to turn the switch is what you see here. Now, I have safety pins. I use safety pins because they've got a sort of a flexi spring to them. And here are little tubes that go through the base of the layout. where the switches and that sit on through the homosode and that go down underneath the layout. And I also have, come on, here we are. Number of these springs here. And these springs here, what I do is I save them out of pens. When a pen runs out, I take it apart and I save the springs. And I also have a few nails, which you'll see where they go later on. And some eyelets that screw into the side. And I've taken stock rail, HO scale, and you can see it's a little longer than 3 inches. And I put a hole in the bottom and a hole somewhere up, not quite in the middle. So I take this, and that's a little closer look at the rods that I use. And the equipment, I've put an eyelet on the bottom of the controlling rod. I take the safety pin, open it up as such, keep that curl and a bend part way up. This is the tube that will go up through the homosode. And this part here you do first, and you put it up in. And then once it is up in and close to your switch, you make your bend here. And that'll be your link. And your spring is going to connect on here. So we're going to take a look underneath. So this is one of my control boards. And in this one here, it's got 4 switches it controls. And you can see it's attached to the fascia board of the layout. Those little eyelets are screwed in with the lever, 2 nails on each side, just stop the lever from going back and forth, and it pops up through the top of the layout. Now that board on the top is 1/8 inch plywood, 3 inches wide, and as long as you need it. And you can see here how these things are attached again. And this is a very close up. You can see the coil that comes through, and then this wire's connected to the lever. And here is the little eyelet that connects it to the fascia. And that gives it the movement. Now these springs here, which come through, I was fortunate enough to get a number of these years ago. And this is what I use, but you can use the 1/8 inch plastic tubing. And you can see they run from the fascia all out to different spots within the layout. And here's a number of them here coming through, and these all go to switches. Now this is the little setup underneath. Now what I do is when I make the link, I pull the link in, okay, this is going up through the layout from the bottom, and this is now linked to a switch up above. So I take it and I position that switch and attach the spring with tension on the safety pin to allow it to be positioned in the normal opening position for that switch. So that what'll happen is if you pull this rod, you're going to move that switch so you can switch from one track to the other. And here's just another shot of it. You can see where I've anchored this to a screw in the bottom. It connects to the lever, which keeps tension on that. And the incoming cable with the little link to it, if you pull that, it'll move the switch. And another shot of another one. Now, this is the my control board. And what you do is you take this lever and you pull it and lock it into this position here. So what'll happen is, as you pull this down, this is number 15. And if you look over here, there's number 15 on this little indicator board. So what happens is we pull the switch, and now the switch has been moved. So it has moved from its normal position and been pulled back and locked in. and it'll remain there until you finish switching. And what you do is you take your finger, touch that little thing and push it to the right, and it will snap back. So it's here, and then it snaps forward. Once it snaps forward, that moves the switch to its normal switching position. As you can see, the switch has now been pulled back, and trains can run on the normal track that they would have run on. Now, this is my main yard switching area, and this one is 46 inches long and 17 switches. This is the upper one, and this is the upper yard, and it is 51 inches long with 17 switches. And then I have one with 6, which controls my upper interchange section of the railroad that I have. And then I have one with 4, which controls the Heinz plant and coming off the main line. Now, the reason I do this is when I do operation, I have 2 people on one. There's 4 stations, and one person is the switchman and one person is the engineer. And that's the way I designed this. And way back in the 80s, when I started building the layout, I didn't have the money at that time to buy all kinds of switches. As you can see there's a lot of switches on this layout. So this was a simplified system that I use. And that is bits and pieces for me tonight. Now, Phil, and I wish I'd met Phil 80 years ago but 3D printing wasn't done then. So Phil is going to show you another system, which I had previewed a little earlier, and I wish I had that system here today. So here you go, Phil.
Thanks, Gary. I'll go ahead and throw this up in the slideshow here, and we'll go ahead and show you what we're a different concept for doing turnout control. So this is a concept of doing 3D printed turnout control. So this was actually a result of on one of the actually later on Wednesdays have a meeting with my ON30 group out, the modular group out here in California, and some of them said, wouldn't it be interesting if you could have a vertical hand control for the turnout at the edge of the layout? So basically, this is what the control system looks like. It's on the front of the layout. There's a little box. It's got a vertical slider that moves up and down inside, and that actually then moves the turnout. All the parts are 3D printed, and I'll walk through kind of what the pieces are and how long it takes to print them. If you look underneath, it's actually a pretty simple little mechanism. On the left, you've got the box that's on the front. It's got that paddle. It's on the little gray piece that sticks through. You can see there's actually a piece of filament there acting as a fulcrum point. The shape there is designed because there's a pad on it, and that keeps it aligned. And I'll show you the parts, the 3 CAD drawings for the parts. On the back of that, there's a little extension that's actually 2 pieces. What that does is if you think about the way vertical motion rotational motion works, if you go a certain distance out and you go back and forth around a fairly short angle, it becomes much more of just a horizontal or direct motion. So what this does is you move the little paddle up and down, the horizontal motion becomes horizontal by that little extension, and that goes over to a 3D printed turnout little control mechanism. This actually uses a principle of offsetting springs. So if you have 2 springs, the one that's close to the center line, this one here, is generating even though it's pulled fairly taut, it's very little angular force. This one, because it's farther off the center line, is generating more angular force. And you notice that there are two springs on both sides, and that keeps it balanced on the fulcrum point. So it actually takes 4 springs to make this work, to make the system work. This is kind of a little bit closer view of that little mechanism. By the way, if you don't have this connected to the front, it pops back and forth, holds the turnout in place, works great for HO scale turnouts. And you'll notice that molded into this is actually a place for a little micro switch. This is for routing frog power. Works well for HO scale. They're rated at 1 amp, which is really all you need for HO on a frog. So you kind of see the 2 different positions of it here. And this is a little bit closer view of that paddle and how it works. One of the nice things when you 3D print stuff is it's pretty easy to 3D print an alignment tool. So once you've got your turnout mounted, you basically just stick this tool up through the hole in the turnout, and it marks it. You can see through to find the location. Once you've got it centered in the turnout, you basically use little X's there to mark, and that's where you put the screw holes to screw in the moving mechanism. So I think what I've got here is a little video to show you, and this kind of give you an idea of kind of how it works. Those little holes in the back there are not used. I was going to use a spring there, but I didn't. If you can see. So you see, basically it moves back and forth. The bar there between the turnout mechanism of the front panel is just a piece of coat hanger, and actually those little retaining clips are all 3D printed, and they clip on and kind of retain everything and hold everything in place. So obviously, if you were going farther distance, you could use the sliding tube techniques of some of the airplane control tubes or something like that. There's a whole bunch of different little printed parts. This is all created in FreeCAD. Basically, the parts on the left are the front panel. You'll notice that there's on the bottom right there's a little plate that says normal. There are versions of that with normal and diverge for both the top and the bottom. The center ones are actually the turnout mechanism itself. This is the base down here. Because when you're printing with a filament printer, it's best to start with a flat and build up from it. The rest of this prints in 2 pieces, and you can see that they're actually asymmetrical. There's actually a screw mechanism to hold the wire in place, so you can use different size wires for different throw tensions. The little pins that stick out there are where the springs clip, and then they go into these little holes down here. At one point, I actually made caps up to go on top of this. What I found was the springs hold everything together, and you don't really need to worry about it. And this is an example on the right of the clips that clip on and hold on and hold that coat hanger wire in place when you move it back and forth. So basically, this is kind of the cost point. It's less than 50 cents in filament. It's not a lot of weight here in the filament. The routing switches, I think I bought 10 for $6.50 on eBay or Amazon. I don't remember which. The springs, I bought 100 of them for $8 or $9. And so the total cost is about $2 per turnout. And it's about 12 hours of print time. So basically, this is, let me turn my virtual background off to make it easier to see here. So, basically, you guys kind of saw that. It's, pretty smooth and simple. Now, this one here, obviously, is on the front panel down a ways. That was kind of a comment I got when I showed it to some folks. So This is a alternative version, and this would be one that could mount horizontally and do the same thing. It's much smaller and thinner, so if you had a fairly thin front panel, you could do that. And you notice the little divergent marks here on this one are then point right and left. So I don't know if you can see that. It says, one says normal, one says diverge. They just go in underneath. So when you screw them in place, they're in place there on the design. So that's different kind of turnout mechanism. So with that, Gary, I'll throw it back to you. See if there are any questions.
I thank you both for some brilliant ideas on turnout control, and it just shows the importance I think 3D printing is going to play historic in the future in our hobby. Phil, I think that's a great idea, and Gary, what you did is just fantastic. It really is. I appreciate both of you taking the time.
By the way, if anybody's interested in those 3D print parts, let me know. I was going to put them up on Thingiverse. I just haven't done it yet, but I'll put them up as a set of pieces on Thingiverse so people can get them.
Thanks so much, Phil. That's great.
Thanks, Jim.
Yes, sir.
Thanks, Phil.
And again, if you have some ideas for bits and pieces or quick tips, please contact Hank or Gary. Otherwise, this is the last one that we'll have now for either Hank or Gary until we get some more ideas. So for both of you, thank you so much. And I hope we get a lot of ideas coming in. Now I'd like to go to Bob Davidson for his workshop that includes tips, tools, and techniques. Bob, welcome.
Thank you, Jim. I'm going to set up my share here. And so this week on workshop tips and tricks. Again, my background's in the theater business and as a carpenter. Tonight's episode is work surface alternatives for assembly, not necessarily for painting, but for assembly. Typically, we're working either on a laminate counter, our workbench, or a wood board or plywood, cutting mat, or foam core, expanded PVC board, or Sintra, or a lot of people still actually do work on glass or ceramic cutting boards. The typical work surfaces, the pros, you can use tape or pins. They're readily available and inexpensive. Cons, you can glue things to them. Things can get stuck. They can be difficult to clean. So I now pretty much do most of my assembly on sheet metal. And the pro here is I use magnets to hold parts and jigs in place. They are relatively inexpensive, very easy to find, especially if you have like a sheet metal shop in your neighborhood. Go ask them for some scraps. Easy to clean. The cons, magnets love to join themselves together, and it's not terribly friendly for real small items. So this is for larger things that you may be building. Most of us are familiar with this Micromark kit, which is basically the same thing. They kind of come with door closer magnets, and it's a nice small tray. I actually have one. This is what I started with. But now I went over to Lowe's and got a 12-inch by 18-inch solid sheet metal pan for $9.50. You just want to make sure they're flat. And what I use are these refrigerator magnets, these rare earth magnets that you can get on Amazon. There's all kinds of different sizes and thicknesses. There are some kits of these that are like variety packs. They'll come with a lot different sizes. These are typically the sizes I use. This is all in millimeters, 6x1, 10x2, etc. And you can see on a bunch of them, what I've done is I've used CA and actually put some styrene tabs on them. And I use the tabs as a method of holding things down, which I'll show you in a second. So here, for argument's sake, it's just a little trestle thing. I found a picture on the web. I scaled it, printed it out. I cut off at the bottom to give myself a baseline. Here's a little trick that I've been playing with, and I would appreciate some input from everybody on. I cover it with, I took a piece of unbleached parchment baking paper from my wife up in the kitchen. And I have experimented with CA, styrene cement, PVA, wood glue, and things don't stick to it. It just peels right off. So I would love to hear other people's experience. And it's translucent, so you can see the plan right through it. So here you can see I started, again, this is just a demonstration for this session. So I used the magnets to hold parts in place. And then for cross pieces, I actually stack some magnets up. So this is where I would do my first glue. The other thing that's kind of cool with this is you can use it. They work through a cutting mat. So as long as your mat isn't too thick, the magnets hold just fine. So something to think about. For other larger objects, I went over to, we have a Harbor Freight, most people do, or you can get these on Amazon. I picked up 4 of these magnetic welding pieces for $6. And I use these when I'm doing wall assemblies. So here you can see they're on the sheet, and I use them as a backing to hold things square. They're at 90 or 45. And then I use the small magnets on the front to hold the walls in place. It works out really good for gluing up wall sections and other things. I use these when I did the some of the girders for the elevated subway. So that's kind of just an idea to think about for assembling stuff. You can get much smaller pieces, obviously, like say scrap sheet metal from a tin knocker in your area. That would be great to try. Our tool of the week this week is trammel points. I love trammel points. I found these for like 16. They're not cheap. You can spend a lot of money on them. But basically what trammel points are is just a giant, it allows you to make a giant compass. If you're doing large radiuses on your track, you can basically, it allows you to clamp them to any piece of wood you have around. I actually have a set that I have clamped to a yardstick so that I can very easily set my radiuses when I'm drawing out arcs. The other thing that they're good for that a lot of people don't realize is you can use them for spacing. So if you want to have 6-inch spacing, you set your trammel points at 6 inches, and you can strike arcs just by running down a line or around a curve. So if you needed to have supports every so many inches around a curve, they're really good for arcing that out. So again, just something that's in my toolbox that I use quite often. Tonight's neat website, and I'll put this in the chat, and this is a lesson in if you look hard enough on the web, you won't believe what you might find. On my layout, which is set in the 50s, I wanted to find some period stoplights from New York City. The stoplights in New York City at the time just had green and red. I somehow came across this. This is actually like a veterinarian who specializes in workhorses. You can see by the thing. But this is Willis Lamb's traffic signal collection. And it's just phenomenal what this guy has put on this site. And here's one that I was looking at. He has all these old ads, old catalogs and ads. And here you can see that not only do they have stoplights, like here, when you get the full stuff. So, this will be easy. I plan on 3D printing these. But there's street signs. There's all kinds of stuff that you can find. So just something really cool. Like I say, I'll put the link into the chat because it's just a really cool place to kind of poke around and get some inspiration. So that's tonight's thing. Next week we'll be measuring up with rulers, scales, and squares. And I will stop my sharing now and go back to y'all.
That's fantastic. You always have some fantastic information on the website. I've never even heard of that website before.
Yeah, like I say, it was an accident. And if you actually go to the root website, it's for a horse veterinarian. So go figure.
Thanks so much.
You're welcome.
Well, now I want to go to Tom Farrell, who is scratch building a new layout. But tonight he's going to tell us something a little bit different. He scratch built a caboose. Tom, welcome.
I think we may have lost Tom, so we may have to
Okay.
jump forward and come back.
Here we go. Here we go. Here we go. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Sorry, I had it muted. Thank you for having me this evening, and we'll get back to my layout next week. I'll have the digital command center in place, and hopefully won't bore everybody to death. I'll try to make it interesting. This evening, I have a substitute, a scratch-built workhorse caboose I did in ON30, and kind of used a new technique to speed the scratch building along. Phil, if you could throw up the PowerPoint, or I could do one myself.
Here we go.
All right. So that's an overall of the finished caboose in black and white there. I actually made this thing in 2019. At the end of it, I'm going to tell you what I'm going to do to it when I revisit it and actually find it. It's squirreled away in a box somewhere right now. So let's just go forward here. I promised 15 minutes. I began this project with a ready-made freight car underframe. This is, they're sold in a 3-pack from Bachmann. This is ON30, and you can get them in black or oxide red. They're sold less trucks and couplers. I chose black. The first thing I did after removing the couplers so I wouldn't damage them was put wood around the perimeter. So I just took some scale lumber, 2x8s. I scratched the wood so it had some grain to it, and then with a black India ink wash, I stained it, and then I super glued it to the outside frame. So that right away, that gave me a huge jump start on my caboose. Go to the next page. Then I started with the decking, and again, I took scale 2x6 basswood. I scribed it. I stained them individually so they wouldn't all have the same look to them. I used different stains. It's particularly evident in the upper right-hand photograph. And again, I super glued everything down because you're putting wood on plastic, so you don't have too many choices with the adhesive. And I tried to keep everything square, so I didn't want any run out. Okay, next one. I elected to put a plywood floor in this because the Bachmann underframe was somewhat warped, and I wanted to add a little strength and a little weight to a little mass to this. So I took a 1/8 inch model aircraft grade plywood and a little saw that I have from Micromark, and cut that. And if you notice, I notched out the front of it for the door. So go to the next slide. So here we see the siding. That's just a scale siding from Mount Albert. Again, I use the same India ink washes, and I test fit the Grant Line windows to the side of the caboose there. Here you see all 4 sides in place. Now just like my structures, I put in 1/4 inch bracing. That way, if you pick this thing up, you don't crush that very delicate siding, which is pretty flimsy, and it doesn't cost you any real money. It just costs time to to brace the living daylights out of it. Makes for a really strong model. I should point out that even though I build lots and lots of scratch builds, this is the very first scratch build piece of rolling stock I ever made. Okay, next slide. So here we see I'm test fitting the doors, the front and rear doors. The rear door is just a single door. The other is like a freight door, if you will. And then I frame them in wood. If you see to the bottom right, I put some wood out around the perimeter of that rear door. Okay. Next slide. This is the roof. I took the roof off of a ON30 caboose, Bachmann caboose that I kit bashed. So I had this roof in my parts bin. So I made a couple cuts there, and I removed the walkway in the top, and then I squeezed it together, with styrene glue and glued the two halves. Now it was too short, so then I had a couple fill pieces that I put in, just happened to have black plastic, and not that that matters, but I put in a couple of fill pieces. I think they were 040 or so, and with some sort of plastic glue, solvent glue, glued it in place. Go to the next one. The tar paper is actually watercolor paper, very textured. It has like a rough texture to it. And then just with watercolor paint, I just put washes of watercolor on there, and a magic marker. I put a couple lines in there, and came out pretty effective. And then those roof board supports, that was the most difficult thing on this whole scratch build. They're very tiny. I chose to make them out of wood, which was a mistake. Next time I'll make them out of styrene. But I got them in place, and I super glued them to the roof. The end railings, the safety rails at the end of the caboose, I didn't want to make them out of wood because I thought wood would be too fragile, and I didn't want to use styrene for the same reason. So I used brass, and I made a jig, which you see on the left there. I just took a piece of plywood and a couple pieces of that 1/4-inch material. I drew out what I wanted, made this jig, and soldered it with a heavy-duty Weller hand gun. And the second picture there is it's the solder is very soft, so you just file it away. It takes like minutes to get it to look from the left to the right. And then I with a rattle can just sprayed it with a primer, and it's pretty strong. Really, it's much stronger than wood, and it's much stronger than styrene. So that all worked very well. Next picture. There it is, weathered in place. I super glued that into place, and it's not going anywhere. I mean, you can pick it up by that. It's not a delicate model, and you can see the rear doors weathered there, and it's starting to look like a caboose. So we'll go to the next picture. So there I have the windows in place, and I weathered them. I weathered the frames differently than the Mullins, which are green, and I put in it's not weathered there, but the smokestack that leads to the, quote, potbelly stove inside. And there's a ladder there that's from Grant Line. I cut and painted it and super glued that on. I used super glue ACC for the whole model. Next picture. So there's a side view of the other side. It too has a ladder. You can see that I've put those walkways. Those are scale 2x4s running across the top of the roof. This is all Mount Albert or equivalent scale lumber. And it's all scratched with either a file or a scratching tool that I have, and then washes of alcohol washes across it, and some paint too. You know, this, see along the roof line, I put some, looks like rust coming down from the roof, suggesting that the roof might be metal. I just wanted it to look like hell since it's a work caboose. Next picture. Now the back of the caboose has a canvas roof support, which you'll see. So again, I used the same technique. I drew what I wanted, then I built a simple jig, and I cut this brass. It's roughly an 1/8 inch by an 1/8 inch, roughly. I cut it with snips, and then I filed it with a file so everything was square. I actually used a circular electric sander that I have from Micromark, just a little sander. So I got all the ends square and tight fits, and I laid those vertical brass pieces in place. And then with my heavy duty Weller hand gun, I melted the solder onto the joints. And show the next picture. Little blurry, but there's that frame in place. It's super glued in place, and I made basically a bookcase for the front of this thing. You'll see it a little, if you look to the right, that's the front of the work caboose. Then I put in I forget where I got it, but a workbench. I painted everything up, put in a trash can there. In the trash can, when I put the trucks on this model to see how it would ride, I suspected that cast metal workbench would throw the balance off of the car, and it did. It was listing to the left. So I came up with the idea of this trash can has some tungsten Pinewood Derby weights inside of it, and that righted the wrong, and now the car is balanced, and I have some nice weight to the car. Next picture. There's a view of the frame and the canvas roll. The theory is that if it rains and you're working on your whatever it is on the workbench, you can pull that canvas over that frame and get some protection from the rain or the sun. That's the theory of it. Plus, it was just a neat idea. I went to Hobby Lobby looking for some sort of gauze material. I found a handbag that was like nothing, like $3. I just cut a patch right out of the handbag and threw the handbag away. And I coated that thing with super glue, a really fine super glue. It smoked so much I thought it was going to catch fire when I did that. Just a little side note. But it's now like a piece of plastic, which is what I wanted. Okay, next picture. Now here we see the underside of the freight car. I started weathering. This is all the details that come with that pre-made Bachmann underframe. Just saves a lot of steps, you know. And then, of course, I purchased the arch bar trucks, weathered them up, put the couplers on, and we're ready to go. Show you the next picture. There's a picture of the finished car. I said I'm going to revisit that. You see the wall that's on the right-hand side. They're 1x6s, vertical, across from the workbench. That looks too neat and orderly to me now. I'm going to go back and tear them up a little bit, weather that a little bit, disrespect that wood a little bit, if you will, because it looks too fresh to me. Yeah. Next picture. That's looking down at the car. So you see the frame that holds the canvas and the workbench and the roof, how it's all weathered. Everything's weathered, and the 2x4 walkways, see how they're staggered. Made a really handsome work car. I was really pleased with my first efforts at scratch building. And then the final picture. There it is on the X rustic buff and old Gothic layout. And that's my finished caboose. So Any questions?
It's a beautiful job. No question about it, Tom. Thanks so much for sharing it with us.
All right, thank you.
All right. Well, two people who were supposed to be here tonight, I'm sorry haven't been able to do it. I heard from Peter Virtue a few minutes ago. He had to leave and he had an emergency that he had to deal with. He's the owner of Atlantis Models. And he will be with us next week to talk about his company and the model that he's doing in the build along. The other person was Jurgen Engel from Australia, and I have not heard from him. So I don't know what the problem is, but I'll try to get in touch with him this week and get him on the show for next week, because he's a fantastic modeler and I know you'll enjoy seeing his modeling. So with those two people gone, I'd like to introduce you to Jess Dozier. And Jess, tonight you start putting it all together, right?
Absolutely.
Fantastic.
All right, so I'm going to share my screen because this one will be a lot easier to show sort of in steps. So just give me a second here. I got two devices going on, so we should be able to get this going. All right, can you see a bunch of thumbnails, I hope?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
All right, good answer. Game on. All right, so we're just going to go side by side. So Jim, what do I got, about 15 minutes?
Yes, sir.
Okay, let's make sure this thing opens up. All right, let's see here. There we go. All right, so this should kick over. Can you see a single picture yet?
No, sir.
All right, it's got a little delay.
So Jess, did you share your upper left or did you share the Finder window?
No, I said I basically am screen sharing, but I'm screen sharing on my laptop, but I'm talking through my iPad.
Okay, but when you're screen sharing on your laptop, are you?
No, I'm screen sharing on my iPad. Actually, I'm screen sharing on my computer, like I normally am.
On your computer. So, but when you screen shared, when you went into screen share, did you screen share the thing that looks like the Finder, or did you?
I screen shared the. I basically screen shared the screen sharing, the green button, just like I normally do.
But when you clicked, after you clicked the green button and you picked what to share, I think you shared the Finder.
Oh, okay. Here, hold on.
Yeah, so unshare for a minute and go back and
then go back. I thought I should. Yeah.
Share your main screen, upper left, the main screen. Yeah. The problem is that all we all see is the Finder. We won't see the pictures as you share them. If you share the upper left where it says screen, then we'll see as you share a picture.
Let's try this.
There we go. That's good. Thanks.
Home run. All right. Okay. So basically, this is kind of what I talked about. This is just the black base and then a couple of components, right? So this is, basically phase one. All right. And then let me now I'll want to scroll. Hold on a second. There we go. All right, now we're cooking with gas. Okay. All right. So basically, just obviously, want to make sure that as I do this, when you want to put all this together, you want to make sure that you got a plan. Dioramas look spontaneous and all that fun stuff, but in reality, a lot of planning goes into them and just making sure everything fits ahead of time. So I kind of did some mocking up and I moved some stuff around just because, especially when I built the pilot model, I ended up doing it, a little differently. I kind of had to mess around with it to get it right. I discovered a couple things that I eventually actually modified in the kit. So what I wanted to do in this case is I wanted to be able to see it from both sides. So I wanted one side to be the logboat side, and then I wanted the other side to be where that little dock and outhouse is, right? So I wanted to kind of have sort of two separate little scenes. I know the shade is not included in the kit, but I also, part of this was it's just a simple diorama to display stuff. So I wanted just to kind of get some scale just to see how things looked. Keep drop through, nice and grungy, right? Let's get to the fun stuff. So then part of, if I'm going to put this log boat on one side, well, you wouldn't have a log boat smashed against, trestle piers, right? Even if they had a concrete base. So I wanted to make sure that I had this thing, make sense. So I just took some balsa and I just beat the heck out of them. And I stained them up. I just chopped them up and, basically made a nice little pier. So the next thing we talked about last week is I need to, where the water is going to go, it's translucent. So I wanted to get some color to the base. So really layers, right? Nothing, and even though a lot of it gets covered, it's kind of weird what you want to, even though you're going to cover a lot of it, it'll still sort of come through. And so maybe I put a little more work into it than I needed to, as far as trying to make it look a certain way, or, kind of have a lot of depth. But in reality, what I want to make sure I do is that it's going to add to it if you do all the steps really in depth. I just use the acrylics, raw umber, burnt umber. There's an earth color from the Scenics. I've had these forever. They're cheap. You can find them on eBay a lot, and they're easy to change their tones. So, you want sort of a similar color when you're doing water. All you want to do is vary the depth. So what you do is you either start, you start darker and you add a little light, or you start lighter, you add a little dark, right? But it's easy to mix. And I literally would just mix them up on a sheet and just kind of brush them together. But here's an example of literally just kind of splotching them on. Now, where I didn't splotch them on was where basically I'm going to put dirt. Okay. So really I'm trying to go, where's that water going? And these are just literally sponged on. I like using, just the foam sponges. A lot of times it's just the stuff that comes in, old kit, that kind of fine foam that's a little bit firm. It works really well. Cut it up in small pieces, dab it, and then just sort of sponge it on, because what that avoids for you is any brush streaks. And then to change the tone, just drop in a little raw umber. And I think I stippled it with the brush, and I went back and touched it up with a sponge. Okay. So again, nothing real weird here, super quick. All right. I'm going to scroll through these because there's a bunch. And then once I got them set, I thought it was a little stark. So I just went back and sort of faded it out a little bit. Okay. I took a little bit off of it because it was a little too stark. But that's what's fun about these things, is you can just kind of mess with it. And I don't think it shows up that perfect in pictures, but in reality, those little different shades, darker to lighter, what that basically represents is depth. And it actually shows up in the finished model. It's real subtle, but it actually is super easy, but it actually does make a difference. All right. We going okay here so far?
So far.
All right, good, making sure. So again, a little better lighting, but again, that darker represents light, nothing strange, a little bright light, but it kind of shows the depth. At this point, everything is glued down. I went back and did a little more work to it just to try to show some different areas, because some of this is going to have real thin water. And, I wanted to show the difference kind of where the dirt is and how that naturally would be real shallow right off where the dirt came from. All right, so then now I'm going to add dirt. And, again, I don't want to really mess up the work I did. So sort of a thicker, instead of a 3-to-1 glue, water to glue mixture, this is more almost 1-to-1. And really what I'm trying to do is I only want my dirt to stick where I have glue. So I just sort of swap it on where I want that dirt to be. And then I use generally for, I like to use dirt on my layout, but for dioramas and things like that, that it's illegal to ship dirt, believe it or not, I use tile grout that I color, and it's cheap, goes a ton. And the best part about it is that it has adhesive, it has, tile has an adhesive built into it, tile grout does. So with a little bit of wet water, it actually gets really super, super strong. So real straightforward here. This just goes back to just like how you ballast, right? You use wet water, a couple drops of detergent, or what I like to use, honestly, because it works really well, is super diluted Windex, because it has to have good sprayers on them. They mist really well. So really, I'm going back, I'm going to mist, and then I'm going to add some of my texture. Scenery is, in my mind, it's all about texture. And that's really, if you look at nature, I mean, stuff just builds up over time, right? Deadfall, bark. And when you think about something like this, there would have been a log boat pushing water around, would have been pushing logs around. Those logs have bark falling off. And so a lot of bark and junk and, stuff would have pushed up against the banks and up against these piers. Okay. So in this case, it's probably got more than normal, but just because that's where it is. So again, quite a bit of washed up bark. And I just go back, hit it with that wet water, or not with wet water, but then just like ballast and just, let the whole thing dry. Simple tools. I keep these laying around: wet water, diluted glue, acrylic scenery. But what you start to see, and even though it'll show up here in a minute when it's dry, but it starts to, kind of get some depth to it, right? And there's no water here. So, but if it's starting to look kind of like it should now, once the water's here, it's going to look pretty cool. All right. Scenic Express, the buffalo grass, is just your normal buffalo grass. That's just good old woodland sinks, olives. I'm a huge fan of Martin Wellberg scenery products. His thicket material is it's out of stock a lot. It comes up every few months. The guy makes batches of it, and then it just gets snatched up off Scenic Express. But it is shockingly realistic, and it goes a long ways. It's you get an 8x10 sheet. I think it's $10-11, but honestly, it goes a stupid long ways. And it really is incredibly realistic, easy to deal with. It tears easy. It's easy to make look natural, right? Without a lot of effort. So my good friend, Mr. Tacky Glue, I go through and I just put dollops of tacky glue where I want some of these little buffalo grasses to stick. I don't use they come with an adhesive, but it's not strong enough. It never survives any amount of time. So I'll just put little dots randomly where I want grass to go, and try to think where grass would settle, right? Crevices, low areas in cracks where water would settle, just again, sort of like thinking just like nature. I'm a huge fan of caulk as a scenery adhesive. I use a dark brown. It's dirt cheap. It goes forever. If you cut it nice and small, it's really easy to control, and it's flexible. And when it dries, as long as you don't overdo it, it instantly holds things where you want. So to me, when you're trying to do a big area, it works really, really well. So again, once I do the water on here, I don't want to be messing with too much stuff on this thing, right? Because that's kind of one of the last steps. So I kind of worked through and placed the scenery, and I literally did all this over the course of like an hour. I mean, it's fast. I try not to overthink it. I try not to place too much stuff, because that's usually where, at least for me, when I think about something too long and think about, where to place it, that's usually when I overthink it and don't get anything done. And then it also doesn't necessarily look natural. So when I think about bushes and things, I'm like, where would they grow? Where would water settle? Where's a crevice? Where would it be natural? I'm the nut job who's going around taking pictures of deadfall when I drive by logs all the time, right? And I just use those as reference. But the big thing for me, scenery, why I like it, is I don't think about it too much, and it yields instant results. You see what you do really quickly. Took a little super tree material, just use a little bit of flock, hairspray, my good friend, Mr. Hairspray. Again, simple, don't overdo it. But you notice there's weeds growing up through the where the trestle is going to be. It's a little junky, right? And these are a little stark. The pictures are, because it's the way I had the lighting. And everything looks really stark when it's all wet like this. But once it dries, they always dry lighter. So it can freak you out a little bit when you first do these. But once they dry, they generally, they'll settle right down. Right. And then a little buffalo grass around. So I kind of have a little bit of dirt around those concrete piers. So I put a little grass there because I know that would always be wet. And so put a little buffalo grass, and it would normally be live grass. So I don't put dead grass where water would be. So, easy to think that way. All right, now these look pretty harsh, but they're creosoted, and so they would look pretty rough. This is when they were wet. They obviously dry a little lighter, but I mean, I made these purposely dark. It's like they would be pile driven, beat up, fully creosoted, in bad shape piers. So then, right before I do the water, I want to just make sure I do some other placement stuff. Now, if you look at the little dock scene, I went ahead and did the finish work on it before I placed it. But again, it's like layers, right? We got some real shredded tar paper on the roof. The roof is really weathered. The outhouse is weathered. Spent a little extra time on the barrels. I made sure I had some spillage. I put some moss on the dock. I lose my mind on something like that because you can do a lot in 3 to 4 inches square. You can have a lot of fun. And honestly, it doesn't take very long. I generally have to kind of reel myself in and not do too much. All right. So again, just next part was obviously I got to have those logs ready. That's going to be my next step is the water. So I want to make sure I have them pre-placed. This was before I had the motor done. And I grind the motor up to the point that you almost can't see the green, can't see the blue, but it sort of matters because when you look at it, you see a hint of the blue, you see a hint of the green, and it sort of adds some depth to it. And it's one of those little things like that in dioramas add up. All right, so logs, placement, just trying to think it through. I ended up cutting them a little bit shorter because I wanted to make sure that, well, they fit and that they, looked right. So this is just acrylic heavy gel, and it's literally just sponged on. And this is the thicker heavy gel. What I've adopted more now is that I do like when I do a log pond or I do something bigger, I generally now do a layer of that realistic water, Will & Sinks acrylic, no smell. It dries really thin, but it's really good because it gives a nice little base. And then I'll do, it'll dry dead flat, like perfect calm, like glass. And then I'll do the heavy gel over that. So when this goes on, it's like frosting a cake. It's white. And it can be a little stark because you're like, you might overthink all the, curves and corners, but in reality, it's going to dry clear, completely clear. If you want to have any waves on it, you're going to have to paint them. So that was the first step, was just to basically go back and wherever there wasn't dirt, wherever there was shoreline, just drop all this in. And then there's my magic. No, I did not clean the bathroom with that first. I cut it off a brand new sponge, but that's the kind of sponges I use, just cheap, nothing fancy, more random, the better. All right, pretty straightforward. Then immediately, because I had a plan, now I plant everything. The log, this heavy gel is a great adhesive, but once you put it on, you'll never get it off. So if I try to remove that log boat, that log boat's it's gonna be shattered, right? So that's why I plan a little bit, is I want to make sure that once I do it, it's done and I'm happy with it, because there is no going back. All right, so got the basics now. If you notice too, up here on top of the concrete pier, and I think I took some of that off after I had a little bit too much. What that is that's like leaf litter. It sort of implies that there'd be fallen leaves that would have fallen. And even though I cover a lot of it with the trestle deck, and what I use for leaf litter, it is in most households in your kitchen, I use Italian seasoning or basil, ground up dry, incredibly cheap, and a lot cheaper than what you can get off of scenic sites, and it smells good. So again, this is just it hanging out. I took a lot of pictures in progress. While it takes a good day to dry. Now, and I went back immediately, and if you can see in the lower left, it is starting to clear. And I went back and I had a little bit of edges showing up on the logs, and I wanted to create some wake where the logs were being pushed, so I added more. So I kind of, again, wedding caked it, added a little more, like that's where that logs are pushing the water away. Now, this is what happens after it dries. It just literally clears and it leaves a nice little rippling effect. And you can't really go wrong, which is what I like. So this is after, now the one side, right? I don't need to add waves over there because nothing's over there. It's just, it's getting affected by the log pond on the other side. So it's got some ripples, but it's really pretty calm water. It's a little, but no big deal. This side, however, has got some waves. So as they dry, they clear, but they leave their definition. And again, I think those after a day or so, they start to clear pretty well. And then really what you do, and here's a good picture of the other side. When it dries and it's clear, I think you can see it pretty well in this picture, but the little bit of extra effort that I took to put some depth and some different shades in that base layer shows up here, right? And so when you see this in person, it looks like a lot more effort was put into it than it was. And it looks sort of artistic, but it's really more just about, again, a process. So this shows a pretty good difference in that shade. You've got a little lighter by the shoreline, then it gets darker where the water is deeper. But that's what that little painting, that base does. And a lot of, you can color this water, but I absolutely avoid coloring it because once you color it, it's no longer translucent. It holds acrylic color really well. You can make it bright blue, you can make it whatever, but it's much more effective if you just paint the base, apply it thin so it appears that it has some depth. So again, pretty straightforward, pretty good, pretty fun result. And, if you look, the cracks on the pier, on that concrete pier, the weathering, the tar paper, I put a bird up there on top of the outhouse. That's a Wiseman metal bird. I just painted them gray and highlighted them white. I didn't overdo it. I didn't try to paint an eye or anything crazy. No one's going to look at it and go, hey, you didn't paint your bird's eye. That is a little piece of tissue paper that I mixed blue acrylic paint and white glue 50-50. And then what I did is I sort of painted, I laid the little tar paper out and I painted it and then I crumpled it and I pre-did it to make sure it would work. And then I put it in place and I let it dry. And tar paper, that blue tar paper has actually been around since like the late 30s, actually, shockingly enough. I actually looked it up. All right, so then once that's done, then I didn't want to handle the logboat. It's delicate. So just to go back and do some finishing things in there. And yeah, like I said, I painted the block, I painted a lot of stuff. I covered it with grease and oil, but to me, that's half the fun of it. And if you see on the radiator, even though it's got grime and grease, you can see the brass on the top of the radiator, right? That's just aged brass. The heavy rust on, and then probably the hardest thing on the whole freaking thing was tying the ropes around those tires and getting them on the cleats because I'm not one of those not the most agile person in the world. And I went back and when I put this windscreen in, I went ahead and broke it with an X-Acto. It actually, that doesn't look quite right, now that I look at it real up close, but from afar, you can't tell. The gas cans are a little beat up and, pretty straightforward. All right, Jim, I think that's it.
Well, Jess, I can't thank you enough for taking the time and going to the trouble to do this for us. I think what we just saw was really a master creator of dioramas. And Jess, wow. I thank you enough for sharing your talent with us.
Well, I appreciate that, but what I would say is, it's process, right? It really is. Don't let it suck you into thinking that it's all art, because if all this is from studying other people, but it's really it's layers and process and getting over the mental part of that it is something that that you can do, right? That's half the battle to me, at least in my mind.
Yeah, and the nice part about your kits is everything you need to create that diorama is included. You don't have to go out and buy anything else. So Jess, thank you so much. I really do appreciate it.
Yep. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it.
Yes, sir. Now I want to introduce Bill Banter. This is a start of a new build along for us, one of Banter Models kits. And I think you're really going to enjoy this one. It's a beautiful kit. Bill, welcome.
Thank you. So if you notice, I'm on there in 2 spots. So I'm going to go back to the shop and start in on it. I'm using my iPhone in the other room to see how that works. So I'll give it a shot. Oh, there you go. Right. See you in the other room.
Okay.
Right. So can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
Okay, good. So what we're going to do tonight is we're going to get started on Duncan's boots. There's the kit right there. I'm going to do the O scale version. I do have it available in HO, maybe S scale. I'm not sure. Can't remember. O scale and F scale, 120.3. Well, essentially the kit comes with some instructions, real handy. And there should be 4 bags of parts. And I tend to bag the parts, usually the inner box parts, the inner frame will be in a separate bag, windows, doors, trims, and so forth, another bag, roof and strip wood in one bag, and then last bag has got the siding and so forth on it. So we'll start with the inner frame. I've got one made up here, but I'll just run through this really quickly. So what I'll do is take the floor, and I'll usually start with a wall that will insert into the floor, into some slots, okay? Now the instructions may not say that. I'm just doing it here as I see best. Anyways, I'll add a sidewall, hold it together, and then using some blue tape or masking tape of some kind, just tape the edges to hold everything in place. Right, there we go. Once I've got that together, we got this one already done. I'll take my glue and start running beads along the inside of all the joints. Okay. And that's enough to hold everything together. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to add the back shed, and that's still on a carrier seat. So finding a stray razor blade, I'll cut through some of these tabs. And sometimes you can just cut through one on one side of the part and then just pull it up like that, and it'll just snap right off. And so then take an emery board, just kind of sand off the nubs. And that part should fit in there. It's a little bit snug on the back wall. Usually it should press right in, but if it's really tight, What I'll do then is just kind of sand off the back of the tab a little bit. The material usually comes through usually at the 1/16 of an inch thick, but it can vary. So sometimes you get a spot that's a piece that's a little bit thicker than the rest of it, so it doesn't necessarily fit in the slot as well. But there you go. So I'll add that piece there. I'm going to add a bit of tape on the back here because it was snapping out a bit. I'll add another one here. And the key is to make sure all the joints are good and tight. And add some glue. And I tend not to be frugal with the glue. Get plenty in there. That way it'll stick together. And that's the basic structure right there. On the front, we've got a little alcove here, so let's get that done.
Bill, I got to tell you, that's probably the easiest building I've ever seen go together.
All our kits are that way. Well, some are a bit more intense, but this is a fairly simple structure here. All of our kits have got this interior structure. It just really gives you a really good base to build on to add your siding to, especially if you've got wainscoting along the bottom and maybe some vertical siding at the top or clapboard, something like that. It just makes a world of difference. So this piece here has got a little arrow etched into it. So we'll see if it fits here on the left. Yeah, it does. How about that? I'm not referring to the drawings that I've got in the instructions because I've done this once or twice. So I'm going to assume that the reason I put those little arrows in means it goes to the front. We'll find out in a minute when I put the back piece on. Oops. Glue on the wrong side. This is live, folks.
And it's going to be there forever because the video isn't edited.
There you go. Yeah, no worries. All right, so I'm going to set this back piece in. And work it in place. Get all the tabs tight while they fall out. There we go. So it's loosely put together. I'm going to add glue to the bottom parts. So glue will start setting up. Then I'm going to add a little bit of glue to these tabs on the flats, just to basically hold that. And then on that little assembly, this piece fits in over the top. Hopefully you can see that. Hopefully it'll fit. I'm going to sand off the tab a little bit, make it a little bit thinner. So it has to fit into here from the inside. And I'm doing it from the inside so you can't see it in case I screw it up. There you go. So the top tab of that inner doorway is a bit tight. There it goes. It just snapped into place. So then I'll put a little bit of glue on here. Get that set. So we're going to let that set and dry. What I'm going to do is turn you over that way, and we're going to stain the siding pieces. And I'll explain that as I go through it. Right. So what I've got mixed up here is grimy black, right, from True Color. So I mix up a stain, which is kind of my stock stain, and I like to stain all my sheet wood ahead of time with grimy black. It just seems to give a good finish in the end. And using the appropriate thinner with that paint, what I like about this, it is a solvent-based thinner. It dries well, it doesn't warp the wood, and gives me the good results. Now the sides of this building will stay a naturally weathered, have a naturally weathered appearance like that, and the front is going to be painted. I may paint the sides too, who knows? We'll see what happens. We'll finish that up next week. But what I'm going to do right now is give you a quick walkthrough. We'll see how this works. We'll set the camera into the Osmo here. Bear with me. Up there. Hang on. Let me just redo that a second. That didn't come out so well. Right, so we're going to take a quick tour. Here's our lasers, got 3 of them. This is the cutting area in the shop. Wood materials up above. On the other side, strip wood's up on the top, and this is kind of the assembly table where I put all the cut parts ready to assemble into kits. Right over next to that is the work table where all the supplies live. And every once in a while, I'll actually build something. So we'll walk over into the fun area. And sitting over here, got a little shade locomotive. I apologize, I'm showing off a bit. But what would a shade be? Oh, hang on. Let me turn the air on. There we go.
Isn't that something?
Been working on this for a while. So this is a 7.5 or 7.25 inch gauge, 2.5 inch scale, 2-cylinder Shay. So this is my this is the other half of the shop is sort of a machine shop. I've got a CNC lathe right here. It's fun. On the other side, that's a manual milling machine, and right next to it is a CNC mill. You know, just toys. And over here, manual lathe. And we'll go out into the dark area. Turn the light on. And then this is the ON3 layout. Well, it's a big diorama, let's put it that way. And as we come around the corner here, we see Duncan Boots sitting here.
Yeah.
And eventually, well, this one's finished. It'll be sitting in this place when I get the scenery done. We got a couple other buildings here that are coming along. This one right here is going to be a basically a diner with a convenience store, grocery store next to it, and bus stop. Out behind here is I don't know what it's going to be yet, but it's going to manufacture wood products of some kind. And so these two will be out in the next couple of months. But it's a wood products company because this is a logging railroad and got to do something with all that lumber. And there you go. That's the tour. Back to you.
Bill, thanks so very much for sharing all that with us. I'd never seen your layout before. I'd heard about it, but I'd never seen it before. And the shade that you showed us, that's just fantastic modeling.
Well, thank you. That's yeah, that's going to be a fun project when it's done. I hope to get it out. Hope to get it on the track this summer.
I tell you, when you do, I hope you'll come back and show us a little bit about the operation of it, because I think that would be something really to see.
Yep, we'll do that. So,
all right. So see you next week.
Yep.
Thanks so much, Bill.
You're welcome.
And now let's go to Bill Davis for, I believe, Bill, this is the conclusion of your build along?
One more after this.
Oh, one more? Okay, fine.
Yeah. Yeah. That's quite an act to follow, let me tell you.
He's
all right,
something. He's really something.
Very impressive. Very, very
Yes,
impressive.
sir.
I've heard about, I've built his kits and I've heard about his stuff in the past, you know, and actually met him at one at the Pasadena 2013 convention, and awesome guy. Just
I should have asked him if he was going to bring that Shay out as a kid. I forgot to ask that. I'll ask
yeah,
him.
that would be nice.
Go ahead.
All right, here we go. So unshare screen. Let's go to the desktop here. Maybe. Yeah, there we go. All right, so let's see. Let's go to full screen. Where's the full screen thing? I never can find the full screen thing. That's a slideshow. Phil.
You're at bottom left, the icon that over one more right, one more right. There, click that one.
Ah, there we go. All right. Oh, great. And little thing here. All right. So this is part 4 of our project here. We've had some delays in here. I've had some health issues. But anyway, we're getting down to the nitty gritty here. We're going to work on the roof today and some other things like that. There's not a lot here, but we'll do some covering here. So the first thing I want to do is talk about this bay window roof. Now, last time we assembled the bay window, but we didn't put the shingles on here. And once again, our good buddy Rich planned it out really well. He recommended that we put some black in the joints here, so if anything showed through, it wouldn't show through as white, but that was not an issue. Each one of these pieces is cut exactly to fit. I mean, there was no cutting, no nothing. You just simply build the roof up to the top. Now, the second floor. My intention is to put interior detailing in this building and lighting. And so I wanted the second floor removable. So in order to do that, I had to modify the second floor pieces so I get out past my modifications around the windows and some other things. So I added some pieces of wood strip around the top where the second floor would go. And I used basically 1x8, 1x10. I try to remember in there, and that's just laid on its side and painted white. And then I laid molding along the walls, and so to support the second floor that's going to go in there. Now, in order to make this all work, though, I had to cut down the floor piece here. So you'll notice that the walls tend to go past the floor just slightly on all the wall pieces when I assembled the walls. And I also had to cut the corners out here because I added 1/8" square pieces at the corner when we put the walls together. So these pieces all just kind of fit right together. I put a couple of extra details in. I added the molding around the walls and the doors. And you may remember earlier on how we didn't do the printed doors, but we actually added material to make them look like they're 3D doors. I just think it looks a lot nicer that way. Again, I used the redwood colored flooring in the building. And so this is basically what the second floor looks like. This is a side view of it. You'll notice the doors again have the raised material around the edges. I just painted it. And I also used little scutcheon pins for the doorknobs. Trust me, that is a challenge, and I have to do two-sided. Yeah, you got just a little tiny nub, and you got to try to get it in the same hole on both sides. It's fun. So this is the second floor is completed. Both sides, you see the front side and the other side. So the second floor pieces are all completed. Now the chimney. The chimney was really kind of a challenge to put together. It's nicely laser cut. It fits, all the pieces fit well, but it's small and it's challenging. And I wanted to look kind of weather beaten and in bad shape and stuff. So you can see where like the bricks coming off here, these extra detail bricks coming off loose here. I basically painted it with acrylic paint, and then I went back with oils and did the brick lines in here. Around the top here, I added Bragdon's chalk and made the soot color. And what I did was I put some chalk up there, and then I went back with some water and stuff and kind of made it blotchy looking, so it looks like soot and dirt and smoke had come through there and had dirtied it up there. Now, the roof. This roof piece is really cool, and this is a couple kits now I have built by Rich, where he was kind enough to give us these, where's the mouse? These wonderful lines here for laying out the shingles. Trust me, I have done in the past where I had to lay those out myself, and having them just laser cut like that was just a joy to have in this kit. And so this is what the roof looks like. These are all just laser cut shingles he put in there. I kind of wish I had done something around the chimney here, and I may go back and add some kind of flashing or something like this because it just doesn't look quite right to me. But otherwise, I just white glued these shingles down, and they just laid right in there. Went back with Bragdon's chalk and added weathering colors and streaking down, like from rain running down the roof, and discoloring different areas. I glued the chimney in up here. And like I said, I think I'm going to add some flashing along here. I think that will just really kind of set it off because it looks like there's something missing here. And so this is what, this is, come on. Anyway, I'm not sure what that says up there. Anyway, this is what the building looks like. I think today they've done a lot of work on it and did a lot of repairs to it, and so it's in pretty good shape nowadays. So that's what it was. This is about the walkway. So the walkway has this railing on it, and this is the walkway part down here. Now I will tell you right now that I did not make a railing like this. I cheated, and we'll get to that next time. But I think what I did come out look really nice. So here's the walkway. Now, the kit provides you a laser cut walkway, but a couple things. I wanted it longer because in the picture, let's go. You see it goes back almost back to this back window. So I made it longer. Plus also when I did my carving of the contour for the hillside, I carved it back that far, so I had no choice. So what I did was I took pieces of 1x8 and stained them and used 4x8s underneath to make the frame, and 6x6 for the post, or 6x8s for the post on the thing. And so that's the walkway this far. You'll find later on a bracing to it and a railing to it. What are you doing, computer? I've got the circle of death going on here. What's going on here? Well, don't tell us. How do I get out of this, guys?
Just what's going on? Just hit the escape key if you're.
It's got the little circle thing, the multicolored circle thing just spinning on it for all of a sudden. I'm not quite sure why.
Not sure. Click escape and see if it restart it, maybe. Supposed to get you out of the slideshow.
Nope. Let's see.
Okay, try that arrow. Try clicking the right arrow down there and see if that.
Don't let me do anything. I don't know what's going on here. Well, the rest of the things are just pictures of the finished model up to this point here. And so unfortunately, I won't be able to show them. I'll show them next week to you guys. I'm sorry this happened, but
Hey,
okay.
It's live. It's live. What can I tell you?
Let's see. Let's go back then and see if we can get a look at that. Okay. Nope. It's back in there again. Okay. So there's something in the next week.
Next week. Thanks, Bill.
Now you have a reason to wait for next week's show.
There you go. Absolutely. Thanks
All right.
so much, Bill. It's
Okay.
looking good.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It really is an awesome kit, and Richard is just does excellent design work when he puts these kits together. I mean, all the kits I've ever built, and I've said this before, I know, but all the kits I've built for Richard, and I've built many of them, I've never had a problem with them.
Well, this one's a nice kit. So thanks
Yeah,
so much.
yeah, got a lot of got a lot of personality to it and stuff.
Yeah.
So, all right, next time.
See you next week.
All right, bye.
Well, now I want to introduce Earl Hackett. You remember Earl? Earl did a great segment for us, or several segments for us, really on CAD design and how to do CAD and this kind of thing. And he's back. He's going to build a house this time for us, I believe. So Earl, welcome. So happy you're back.
Yeah, here I am. Okay, it's going to be you hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. Let's hang on a sec. Share screen. And I want to share this one here. Share. Okay. Start this. There we are. Okay, you got that?
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. There's going to be three. There are going to be three parts to this. First one is tonight, and we're going to talk about design considerations based on the printer that you're using and the structure, the structure you're trying to build. Then the second part will be on component design and joining them together. And the third part will be on painting and finishing. And I ran into some problems there. I think I have some solutions. It sort of surprised me. So let's get on with this one here. The model I'm building is the bunkhouse at Thurman, West Virginia. This was where trainmen would stay overnight waiting for the next job, their next trip. It has, it's about, I'm going to guess about 80, I think it's about 80 feet, 90 feet long. Very basic construction, shiplap siding, tar paper roof. And it's interesting. Well, here's the drawing that I built it from. There are two sections. On the left side, you have a somewhat larger area. On the right side, you have a somewhat smaller area. And I was wondering, what the heck is this? Well, it turns out the enginemen and the conductors and the locomotive engineers, let's say the engineers and the firemen, stayed on the left side where they have more room, and the brakemen were confined over on the right-hand side. I don't know why that was, but that's the way they had it set up. And they had you can see you have an entrance there. You have a cooking area, some locker rooms, and it's on a slope. So it's actually, most of it's built on pilings, as is almost all the structures there in Thurman. Well, this shows the building with the print volume that I have in my Saturn printer. It doesn't fit. So we're going to have to break that thing up into multiple parts. And we wound up with 6. We have 2 roof sections, 2 wall sections, and 2 foundation sections. Now, what I wound up with, the actual part actually has pilings coming down here to fit on my layouts, but this is an earlier drawing, and I just never bothered making a print of the current one, but you'll see it. Okay. One of the limitations you have with the printer is the resolution. And the printers, the 2 printers I have are illegal. My first one was a little Mars 2P. It's a relatively small printer, and the Saturn is sort of a medium-sized printer, but the resolution is pretty darn good, 0.05 millimeters, or about 0.02 of an inch in all 3 axes. HO scale 1 inch is about 0.3 millimeters, so you get 6 layers for every inch. It gives you a pretty good resolution of things like rivets and that sort of thing. Now, the resolution, though, is highly dependent on exposure time and orientations. You can find that here. This is what you call a resolution target, or whatever you want to call it. But here you have fins. These 3 here are 0.05 millimeters. A couple over here are 0.1, and then you get a 0.15. They go up to fairly heavy things. And you have the same thing over here on these angled fins. Over here, this section here has grooves for see what your clearances are between pieces. And this is a lousy picture, but I had nothing to focus on. This was a 3-second exposure, and I could not focus on anything. Everything was all rounded and fuzzy. But as you can see, the 0.05 millimeter pieces, they just didn't make it. The 0.1 millimeter pieces here look like they're there, but the edges are all rounded and they're pretty ugly. You go over here to the angle pieces, and I was able to get better focus on this. The 0.05 millimeters, they aren't even there. They're gone. And the 0.1 millimeter piece is pretty well shot as well. Now, one of the things you'd want to notice that all these, even where you have a good fin, for example, here, this channel is plugged up. And I'm going to get into why that happens later on. But here I've increased the exposure to 4 seconds. And the 0.05 millimeter fins are looking really good. I mean, that's a pretty doggone nice, sharp image. But the 10.1 millimeters, of course, they're there, but all these channels are all plugged. So you can resolve a fin or a standing of what do you call it, stand-up piece, or a vertical, a solid piece, a lot better than you can resolve a hole. If you go over here, this angle, these pieces here, they were missing in the 3-second exposure. They're looking pretty good, but those 0.05s, they don't even show up. Just a couple little nubbins here. That's about all there is to it. And you notice that now these channels here are starting to plug up too. They're starting to fill in because of the longer exposure time. Okay, for the resolution, there's I've go back to 45 years ago now. Yeah, it was printed circuit boards, and some circuit board shops would actually go out and they wanted collimated lights, so they get real good sharp exposures. And they got a greenhouse. They hang the doggone parts up in the greenhouse and let the sun expose them. About 2-minute exposure to get it done. And there's problems with that. But then we went to parabolic reflectors using quartz or hydrogen vapor lines, all sorts of high intensity UV lights. Then we tried laser imaging, and they actually, this is getting into the time where we started to do some 3D printing. The Form Lab started with laser imaging. It's well aligned, but the exposure times are long, and I was not impressed with the resolution I saw from some of their samples. And finally, you come up with columizers, and you can get improved exposure time, but you lose some resolution. Now, here's the problem you're looking at. Let's say we just take an array of LEDs and you put them down here, and you try to expose your layer of your polymer. The light's going out in all sorts of directions. And as you can see, these two here are out, and you would hope that you would have a slot in here that would be, this would be a liquid, and you wash it away. Well, light comes from here and comes across, comes here, across, and you can see this gets truncated very quickly. And before long, you don't have any opening there. So what Elegoo has done, they put in columizers, and all these are, and these are small. I think they're about 1 centimeter across in square. And the LED, the LED diode is about 2 or 3 inches down from it. So then they have a LCD screen, and that's what actually forms the image. So where the LCD screen is transparent, the light comes up, but you can see even here, we're losing some. For this one here, it comes across, hits this, and you're losing some material. We're losing the opening here. And that's why the a freestanding part, a solid part, is a lot easier to expose in a channel. There's more to it. The chemistry gets complicated, and I'm not going to go into that. I'm a chemist. I worry about that kind of stuff. But at any rate, another problem you have with the liquid crystal LCD or liquid exposures, liquid materials, the parts are suspended upside down, and they grow from the exposure surface, and they're held on an aluminum plate with an array of columns. So all the columns all come down. This is the I printed this one from the with the roof, pulling it up, because you're not going to be able to see the roof, so I don't care what that looks like. So this is the columns. Eventually will come down. All these orange areas are going to have something attached to them to pull them off of the ground, the plate, as the parts being constructed. And that's what it looks like. Now, this is the a program called Lychee Slicer. It's this is their free version, and I've come to dislike it. You have a lot of freedom in putting in the columns where supports where you want them, but if you turn it loose and just say do it automatically, the software is pretty bad. You can see you have large gaps between these areas here, and this is edge here. You're going to be able to see that from the side, and I just find the automatic part really a pain, and it takes forever to fill in the gaps where you think you need them. There's another slicer that comes with it's included free with the Elegoo printers, and it's called Chudu Box. Where they get these names from, I don't know. But you can see they put the positions here along that edge are very close together. And so you get pretty good solid edge there. And when you, from the side, you can't tell that there's these lumps in the place. And the surfaces, the flat surface here, very uniform positioning of support members. And this is what it looks like when you're printing it. Now, this is the build plate. It was printed upside down from this view, but this makes it easier to see what you're looking at. And as you can see, these come way up, and one of the problems is you can wind up putting a lot more material into these supports than actually is in your model. That gets expensive. So you want to think about how you're going to position this thing. That's why I printed from the bottom up. At least a lot of these supports are just short because you only have a few long ones coming up to the overhead. As good as Chudbox is, it does some stupid things like this guy right here. You remove that before you print. You could go in and just click on it and delete, and it goes away. There's no need for it to be supporting here, and you're going to get a lump on the surface of your model. You're also going to have lumps up here in the overhead, the top here, and they could be a problem. And we'll get into that in a few minutes. You notice that if my window frames are also 3D printed, and I build the sashes for them separately. They go in as independent pieces so they can position partially opened or something like that. But one of the problems is you got to fit this is going to close up a little bit. And I turned out in my case, I didn't leave enough clearance here. It closed up, but I had to go in with a little file and open them up a little bit. Now, when I talk about lumps, that's what they look like. These were the lumps on the first floor I built, for foundation I built. And you can see these things do stick up quite a bit. If you're going to make a joint on this surface, if this surface has to be attached to something, you're going to have to sand it down. So you want to position parts so that any joint, any surfaces are going to be joined together, do not require this kind of support. So these are the minimum dimensions I talk about for clearances. And this will turn out not to be enough. I left a 10.1 millimeter clearance in here, and this thing closed up. Now in this case, I had to go in and sand down those little lumps up here, but just taking those lumps off still didn't give me enough clearance in this opening here. So I had to go in and clean this up with a feather edge file. But 0.7, 0.6, something like that, top and bottom. If you have something that's going on tab that has to fit into a slot, open it up some more. So these are the problems you run into in designing a model. Okay. Here I am. Yeah. Now, that's a very brief overview of how you're going to build things. Next week, I'm going to get into the designing the parts themselves and the designing joints, because one of the problems you saw that building was in two pieces. It's going to be put together. You don't want to be able to see a seam where those two halves come together. So I'm going to go into how I go about hiding these seams where you can't see them. It's not hard, but you have to give some thought to how you're going to build it. Now, when I get to the depot at Thurman, there's going to be there has to be at least at least 4 pieces of the building that have to be all joined together. And fortunately, that's a board and battens building, and you use the battens to cover up the seams. That makes it easy. So that was not too bad. So, okay, next week, I'll be going into the design of the parts and how to put a model together.
You know, Earl, until tonight, I had never understood that when you design something with CAD, you have to do some of the same thinking through the build process as you do if you were building it by hand.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Because if you don't pre-think where things are going to go and how you're going to get them there, then the CAD model is you're just going to be doing it over and over and over again until you figure out how to do it right.
That's right. Yeah, it's you have to sit down and think. Even when you're designing the parts, you can design a part and build a part that you can't put together because it interferes with itself. You have clearances that don't work. And I don't. I'm not talking about thousandths of an inch. I've screwed up and I was off by a tenth of an inch. I just didn't realize that I had this big hunk of thing sitting, because you're looking at two different pieces and you're thinking I'm going to build a little thing to help make an alignment, and oops, I put it in the wrong place. And some you can put them together in the CAD, but sometimes you don't notice that they're not right, and that's frustrating. It's easy to fix. Just print another one, but it's frustrating when you don't do it right the first time.
Yep, kind of like building by hand.
Yep.
Earl, thanks so much. Look forward to seeing you next week.
Okay, very good.
Well, now we have Phil Edholm back. And Phil is going to do his special segment that he does periodically on the NMRA divisions and local clubs. So, Phil, I don't know who your guest is tonight, but welcome.
Thanks, Jim. Appreciate it. Appreciate the opportunity. Tonight got Dave Putnam, who actually comes from the Sierra Division, which is in the Northern California up towards the mountains. Huh. And so I'm going to go ahead and introduce Dave first. And Dave, why don't you start off by telling everybody a little about yourself? I think maybe you had a slide or two you wanted to show. So go ahead and jump there.
Can you guys
first.
hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
Absolutely.
You guys hear me? Great. Okay, I am actually the newly minted superintendent of the Sierra Division, which is part of the Pacific Coast region. Pacific Coast region covers most of Northern California all the way down to the Tehachapis, and then out east into Nevada, state of Nevada, and we also cover Hawaii. So my little division pretty much runs from just about Sacramento to the west, all the way out through Nevada. So big region, a lot of railroad history happened out here, and still a lot happening. We've got the Donner Pass. It was designed by Theodore Judah and built by the Big Four back in the 1860s with the encouragement of President Lincoln. And we also have the Western Pacific that runs a little further north up through the Feather River Canyon, which is now owned by, the track is now owned by Union Pacific. So like I say, quite a bit of history here. We've got the California State Railroad Museum in Sacramento, which I'll talk about a little bit later. But Phil wanted me to go over a little bit about what our division does for its members. I'm told by more than a few people that we have a very active division and a very active region. We tend to attend each other's division meetings, tour a lot of layouts. A lot of activity takes place on Zoom. We have the Apicolas out here in our area, and I'm sure many of you have seen John Abdicola's videos, or even starred in some of them. He tends to turn out several a month, it seems like. So I'm going to mention him a little bit later too. our activities, we have in our division, we have a monthly Zoom meet. It's pretty casual, nothing formal really done. No voting or anything takes place. It's mainly a way to get together and just meet up and talk and show off what we're working on, kind of similar to what you guys do here. And then we have quarterly meets at different points around the division. And we've already planned out all of ours for the year. We're doing our first one coming up in a couple of weeks in Sacramento. And it's going to consist of an op session in the morning at the Sacramento Model Railroad Historical Society layout. Then we're going to have a barbecued lunch there on the patio, weather permitting. It's been a little wet out here, as you've probably heard the last month or so. So, but we are starting to see the sunshine a little bit again. So that's a good thing. Of course, we could always use a little more rain because our reservoirs are really dry out here still. Then in the afternoon on the 11th, we're going to migrate over to the State Railroad Museum. We've arranged with the Railroad Museum to have a comp admission day at the museum for any members that are in the Pacific Coast region. All it takes is send me an email to get in. And if some of you guys that aren't in the Pacific Coast region but happen to be out in Sacramento in a couple of weeks, if you want to give me a shout, I can definitely put you on the list. I'll put my email address on the chat here in a few minutes so you can have that. And then we're also going to have our quarterly division meeting a block away in the Stanford Gallery. Those of you that have been to the museum, Stanford Gallery is about a block west. It's part of the annex to the museum. And the museum library is upstairs. There's probably more than a few of you that are familiar with the library. It's a great resource. They've actually got the Kalmbach collection, which they're digitizing and making available online. So I encourage you to visit the California State Railroad Museum website, and if you haven't before, gain a little more knowledge on that. The museum houses on the third floor the National Model Railroad Association exhibit, which opened up just at the end of the COVID period back in April of 2021. So it's been open about 2 years now, and we've gotten to the point where we've gone in and looked at a few things at the exhibit, and we're going to make some improvements, which will be announced soon. If you haven't made it out and you'd like to come out, it's really worth the trip. Let's see. We try to do on our quarterly meetings, we do in various points around the division. This year, besides Sacramento, we've got plans to meet up in the Reno Carson City area for a full weekend, where we'll have a meeting and tour some layouts in probably Carson City on Saturday and Reno on Sunday. And then in November, our final meeting of the year is going to be down in the Stockton area. So another area that has a lot of railroading history within the state of California. We are always looking for volunteers. Always kind of a tough thing to do, but I think we get a pretty good response from people when we give them enough warning. This weekend, this coming weekend, as a matter of fact, we've got the Great Train Show at the State Fairgrounds called named Cal Expo. It's the name of the fairgrounds. We are having a membership booth at at the show. We're going to have members of the Pacific Coast region there to talk to the public, answer questions about what the NMRA is, and hopefully we might be able to recruit some new members out of the weekend. We're just very open to anybody that's interested in model railroading. We've got a special deal going where they can get a 9-month pass to join for half price. So the whole region is really focusing on boosting our membership and finding ways to market it and giving feedback to the national organization, trying to steer them on what they need to do to boost the membership.
So Dave, I think that's a really good point. I mean, one of the conclusions that in the region came to talking about recruiting was that the challenge is getting people to try the NMRA. And so basically at the Central NMRA, they've come up with the concept of a $20 easy on-ramp pass that you can buy. I think it's called the Rail Pass. And basically it's a 9-month membership, and it's really kind of a try it out thing. What we decided was that one of the challenges at a trade show is, at a train show is, you tell somebody about, hey, there's this great way to do this, but there's no urgency, there's no call to action. So we decided to create a call to action, and we agreed to fund, I think 20 or 25 we agreed to, where we would fund $10 of that $20 from the region. And the logic is that recruiting is so important that it's worth spending that little bit to get somebody on, get them on board, and then try to keep them, versus all the other costs of trying to recruit. So I think that's a pretty interesting concept you guys are doing. We'll see how it works.
Yeah. We're definitely trying to throw everything at the wall and see what sticks. Who knows? By the end of the weekend, we'll know whether this is something that's going to work for us. We might end up offering it later on. We'll just have to see. So finally here in my little spiel, I want to talk about our upcoming convention. So I'm going to share a screen here real quick. Just give me a second to do that. And I'm going to share a screen. And shoot, okay. Help me a little here, Phil, if you can.
Oh, hit down at the bottom right, down at the very bottom right, next to the slider, right next to the slider there. Click that. You were there.
Okay.
That
Right
one
there.
right there. Click that.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. So we have our Pacific Coast Region convention coming up. This year, the Sierra Division is the host division for it. We're having it in Sacramento, again, out near Cal Expo, the state fairgrounds, which is about 10 miles as the crow flies from downtown Sacramento. We are joined with the Feather River Railroad Society. They are co-hosting the convention along with us. Plenty of history going to be talked about at the clinics. We have some cool layouts to go tour, some that have not been seen by the public before. We have some really good clinics, clinicians that are signed up, and we're always looking for more. If any of you guys want to come out to California this spring and see the Golden State looking more like Ireland with all the rain that we've had, be a good chance to do that. We haven't seen that out here for a number of years now. So, and more rain's on the way. So it should be a really beautiful time of the year to come out here For those that aren't that are a little geographically challenged, Sacramento is about a little over an hour east of the Bay Area, and wine country is a little to the north. It's also about an hour away from Sacramento, so you might be able to talk your better halves into coming out and doing a little wine tour before or after the convention happens. So the dates are going to be April 26th through the 30th. Again, nice time of the year to visit. It's not going to be overly hot like Sacramento can get in the summer. Should just be really pleasant. Might even be pool weather. The River Railroad Society is a sponsor, and the Pacific Coast region. And I go one more here. The hotel is going to be the Cal Expo Courtyard by Marriott. We have a special deal with them. Convention rate of $139 a night, and no charge for parking, which is kind of a rare thing these days. This is the quick reference code for the convention. You can scan that and get to the website. Website has all the information available at this time. It's continually being updated as we add more and more clinics, and our layout tours will be listed there, as well as the prototypical tours. One of the ones that might interest people that are into the more modern rail is we're going to have a tour of the Siemens factory here in Sacramento, and that's where they're building a lot of the commuter cars, and I believe they're also Siemens is also going to be bidding on some of the Amtrak, the newest generation of Amtrak passenger cars, and I believe Siemens is also building locomotives for Amtrak too. Okay, for those of you who aren't able to make it out to Sacramento, we are going to offer several of the clinics in a virtual manner. Our virtual coverage will also include breakout sessions with several of the clinicians during that are giving their presentations at the convention. Of course, some of the benefits are no travel and hotel expenses, and you can interact with the clinicians, and I recommend you go in and, if you're kind of on the fence about this, when we start getting our clinician list up and posted, and if you see, some people that you'd like to, pick their brains, this would be the chance. We've got a lot of good clinicians out in our area, and we're hoping to have some from outside the area too. The in-person convention attendees will have as I mentioned, the club and home layout tours. Some have never been seen. Clinics and a variety of prototype tours, excursions to as well as other interesting locations. We have a interesting farm equipment museum that's about 10 miles away from to the north of Sacramento in Woodland. This is a good chance to meet some old friends that you might have out here. And we're going to have also have a contest room, and similar to if you've been to NMRA national conventions, photos and models, both buildings and cars and locomotives. And then on Saturday we have a banquet and award ceremony. And also, as I previously mentioned, the California State Railroad Museum is an easy drive or ride away on the light rail that Sacramento has. And on the third floor, you'll find the NMRA's Magic of Scale Model Railroading, where you basically can walk through the whole history of the hobby up to right up to modern times. So that's about it for me. If anybody has any questions, go ahead and ask.
So Dave, before we kind of drop off of that, so talk a bit about mentoring. So, what things do you all do to help people in terms of learning the skills of model railroading, building, et cetera? Are there things you're doing within the division to try to drive that concept of mentoring and skill building?
Yeah, we do somewhat at our quarterly meetings where people will bring their in-progress projects and talk about them, and suggestions are given. And we also have a very active OpSig and layout design SIG group within the Pacific Coast region. And like I say, it's pretty much one happy region, divided up by our four divisions. And we have there's something coming up in a couple of weeks in the Bay Area that a lot of us are going to be attending, and it's a weekend where we've got several presenters. There's a panel discussion where people can bring their plans for what they want to build on a layout. For layout wise, I'm hoping to have a rough draft of what I'm going to do on my layout, which is to be built. And it's a lot of really good folks out here to talk to and pick their brains. And I could name off a few names. We have Seth Newman out here, Tony Thompson, Jim Providenza, the list goes on. I mean, it's kind of the who's who of model railroading. So I'm sure you've all seen Mr. Providenza and Mr. Thompson's byline on some publications, and those guys are ready, willing, and able to pitch in and give you suggestions.
Yeah, that's an interesting observation that, when we think about mentoring, and we often think just about model building, but when you're building a layout and you want to now have something that can operate and be more prototypical, that feedback is really critically important. So yep. As we close, Dave, just, is there anything that you would say, and you've been in the Sierra division, I think you moved not that long ago into the area. Is there anything you'd say that? Yeah, but there any? Go ahead. Is there anything that you've observed that you'd say, hey, here's something that other divisions really could learn from, that that the Sierra division is doing that's unique and very different?
I just think that the main thing that I've noticed, I came from down south, so I was in Pacific Southwest Division, and also and I belong to a club down there in Simi Valley, which is a suburb of Los Angeles. Down there, it was a lot more. You are much more isolated in your division. I did attend other division events in the region, but not like up here in Northern California. It just seems like it's a little more open. I mean, I not counting Nevada, things seem to be a little closer here. We have Redwood Division up in the northern part of the state, Coast Division, and then Sierra Division, which is kind of the second half of California to the east, and then Daylight Division, which goes all the way down to Bakersfield, includes Fresno and Stockton and Lodi. So it just seems like, to me, it just seems a lot more open. And admittedly, I wasn't really a really active member in NMRA when I lived down there. But, I did take advantage of some of the things that were offered. But it just seems like up here, there's just a little different attitude as far as mentoring and people making themselves available and just good friendships. And that's one of the things that we've kind of discussed with our membership program is to make it a more inviting thing, because a lot of it has to do with the social aspects of things.
Yep, absolutely. Well, I think probably based on the time, we'll go ahead and wrap it up. Dave, thank you for taking the time and coming to see us this evening.
Thanks
and
for
with
having
that, we will throw it back to you, Jim.
Well, Dave, thank you. I'd like to thank you too for being with us tonight. And sorry we had to put you on so late, but hope that you'll consider coming back and giving us some updates on the new programs that you're trying to start, and particularly the one that you're doing at the upcoming convention, to let us know if that worked or not, and if so, how other people might be able to benefit from it, because it sounds like a great idea to me. I'd be interested to know how it works, though.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, thank you so much. And Phil, thank you. Well, I think that may be it for this evening. We do have a short caboose, I think, for you this evening. If you'd like to see that, we'd like to show it to you.
I think it locked up.
Okay. Well,
We'll try it again. We'll try it again. Let's try it one more time and see if it doesn't this time. Hang on.
Yeah, it's cute. It's a good one.
There we are.
Amazing.
Well, folks, that's it for this evening. Hope you enjoyed the show. Most importantly, I hope you learned something. I think we had a wide variety of presentations for you this evening, and I really hope that you enjoyed them all, but at least enjoyed some of them. So thanks so much for joining us tonight. We'll see you next week.
See you, Phil and Jim.
Yes, sir.